Maximo Alvarez, president of the Sunshine Gasoline Distributors. He's a Cuban immigrant, and he has been speaking out, and I thought you needed to hear his voice. He's a Cuban immigrant that is warning now that the American dream is under threat. He came here to America when he was 13, and he saw the revolution in Cuba. Maximo, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Glenn, and it's an honor. I've always admired your way of thinking. I admire you for being one of the few people in the press who really tell our country what is going on objectively as possible, because everybody's afraid to tell the truth, I guess. In the name of being politically correct, everybody's become literally a hypocrite.
Yeah. Maximo, I'm so glad to have you on because I've one of the things I've always had a big fan base of immigrants, especially the immigrants that come from communist countries in the Eastern Bloc or Cuba, and I think they have the most important voice, and it's not being highlighted. And I gotta believe that even though you were young, you remember enough of what was happening over in Cuba that it must be a little terrifying for people who came here and have seen communism and Marxism and how it overthrows countries. It must be a frightening deja vu.
Glenn, it really goes further than that. I happen to have learned from mom and dad who had to migrate from Spain to Cuba at the turn of the century, running away from communism. So I knew firsthand how difficult and how painful it was for families who were being destroyed for no reason, families who had nothing to do with politics, families who had nothing to do with government. It was just hard-working families. So I grew up in that environment. And then, sure enough, by the time I'm 11 years old, the same thing happens in Cuba. And I remember my dad trying to convince my mom while listening to Castro's words while he was up in the mountains. He used to broadcast radio at night, and, shortwave radio. And I remember my dad, and I mentioned this when the president was here, my dad used to tell my mother how he thought that SOB was a communist. And my mother used to even argue with him and said, how can you say that? He was raised by the Jesuits. He's a Roman Catholic, his entire family. As a matter of fact, the very Catholic Church helped save his life. The very Catholic Church pretty much helped finance his revolution. And then I happened to be part of the Catholic Church. My education was all Catholic. And then all of a sudden, my school was taken over. And all of a sudden, the Marist brothers were hiding because they were being persecuted. So they had to go and hide in embassies or leave the country because their life was threatened. These are the very people that help the Castro regime take over. And you know what is really sad? The media. Fidel Castro never took over Batista's regime. Batista left. Batista left December 31st, 1958, at midnight after he celebrated New Year's Eve. And he left because he lost control of the country. And guess what? Guess who actually was one of the biggest factors that Batista leaves? The media. They were destroying Batista. And then, a few months later, what happened to the media? What happened to El Diario de la Marina, El Diario del Mundo? This is the equivalent of the New York Times and the Washington Post. What happens to CMQ? That's the equivalent of CNN. There's no free press. And what is amazing is these people in the press do not understand that they will be the first ones out of here. Mm-hmm. But when they find out what they did, it's too late. Way too late. So I had the chance to speak in the panel when President Trump was here, and the judges told me to tell you a story. And I'm humbled to tell you, it's amazing how my little story has impacted so many people. Because I'm telling you, Glenn, my story is just one of many, 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 many millions of people running away from communism, looking for the land of the free. And it's amazing. It's amazing that we don't appreciate that. And I remember, and I said it in my speech, and I'll tell you, and this is something that will resonate with me until I die, how my father came from Spain to Cuba at the age of 18, never to go back, work his ass off. And when he's about to enjoy the fruit of his labor, he saw my brother graduate. He had to send him because he was in that age that he was going to be indoctrinated. And soon after that, he had to send me out because they had taken over the schools. And I remember when he finally gets over here, and he tells us, this is a man of a sixth grade education. This is not a philosopher. He didn't go to Harvard. He didn't go to Yale. But a very wise man who used to tell us how lucky he was because he was able to go from Spain to Cuba and to Cuba to America. And he said, don't lose this place because you're not going to be as lucky. So this is what I'm trying to warn, and I'm amazed that that little story, which is only one of many millions of stories, has been so positive, has gone viral, and I'm humbled to know that I'm pretty sure it has helped quite a few people understand what the reality is.
So, Maximo, first of all, thank you for sharing that, especially about your dad. That's got to be a painful memory. You said that your mom looked at Castro and said, how dare you say he's a communist? So it's the same. Is it the same thing every time where people are just duped and they believe that this time it is different? And these aren't the monsters that rule at night?
Glenn, this is the same old story. It doesn't change. We need to explain to people that the communist philosophy is based on the fact that the ends justify the means. The ends justify the means. On our side, we have the Judeo-Christian values. We cannot steal, we cannot lie, we cannot kill. We got to honor mom and dad, we got to honor God. We got to respect people. And on top of that, we have to forgive our enemy. Now, on the other side, they will do whatever is necessary to accomplish their objective. If they have to tell you they're Catholics or they have to tell you they belong to a certain religion, they will. If they have to kill you, they will. They have. Just look at history. Look exactly what happened in Cuba. No one would have ever imagined that Fidel Castro was a communist. No one. If you look at just go on the library, any of the books, any of the history books, where they have these pictures coming down from the mountains, every rebel, everyone had a rosary hanging from their necks. And he always claimed that he was, as I said, Católico Apostólico y Romano, that's Roman Catholic. He was educated by the Jesuits. And it was not until 2 years after he had taken over power that he declares that he's a Marxist. And if you look at, and if you have read the book by Saul Alinsky, if you see what is happening, that's exactly what is happening in every of these countries. That's what's happening in our backyard today. That's what happened in Cuba. That's what happened in Venezuela. That's what happened in Nicaragua. Make sure that everybody...
What is...
Go ahead.
What is everybody... What are the Cuban refugees? What are the Cuban families feeling, and how can they help? Is there any movement in those families to come together and to form a bloc and speak out? Because I think they could be a real powerful force.
Here's the problem, Glenn, and I don't know, I'm not an expert in the matter, because I don't have the numbers or the statistics. But if you look at the wave of Cubans who come over right after Castro take over, we came here with a shirt we wore on our back. As a matter of fact, I'm an original member of the Peter Pan group. Those are the kids who came without parents, over 14,000 of us. If you look at, and I know this for a fact, as a group of 14,000, we have done very, very well. But what happened is, after that, you go through the years, Fidel Castro has more people infiltrated in our community than you can even imagine. Fidel Castro has a very, very big, sophisticated intelligence machine. Those people killing young people in Venezuela are not Venezuelan students. They're Cubans. Those people killing Nicaraguans, where their students were demonstrated, they were not Nicaraguans, they were Cubans. Because Fidel Castro exported terrorism the minute that he took over Cuba. I remember the word terrorism wasn't used. It used to be guerra de guerrillas. That was guerrilla warfare. Which one person can create enough fear that will destroy the economy. That means, for example, you cannot go to a theater, you cannot go to a restaurant, because all of a sudden a bomb will explode. And it gets so far out of hand that people are afraid to go out. The government says, you're not protected after 6 o'clock in the evening, so better stay home. And what happens to our economy? Capitalism and fear are not synonyms. You cannot be a capitalistic economy with fear.
With fear.
And this is that's why it's called terrorism. Look what is happening today. And our own governors, mayors, this is amazing. I see the guy in New York painting the street. And all they do is use people to create dissension, to create hatred. And that's what they do. They are the experts.
And that mayor,
at class warfare.
Right, and that mayor happens to be a guy who loves Castro's Cuba.
Yeah.
I've got to run, but I want to ask you one more question. Do you worry about a boycott from the left, like they did to the Goya Foods CEO for his support of Trump?
Glenn, let me tell you, been here now since 1961. I have done a lot better than I expected to do. If I die or I lose everything for this country, I will be here proud of it. So, no, I have no fear. And I'm telling you, what they have done to Goya is the best thing, because I'm telling you, Goya is now going to double their business, because they have provided them with great free publicity, because Goya Foods is a very great product. The owners of that company have been very, very generous for many, many years, and people who know that will help them and endorse them much more than ever before. So, no.
Maximo Alvarez, don't ever give up yourself. Thank you so much. I'm sorry to cut this off, but I've got a network break. But Maximo, thank you. He's the president of Sunshine Gasoline Distributors. His website is sunshinegasoline.com. And I appreciate the perspective coming from you and what you said with the president the other day.